million. So it is a significant increase. And you can see we have put quite a lot of money into some of our proactive funds. That's just forward looking into the future to make sure that TECT can play a big role in the community going forward. Just to go through each of our 3 reactive funds quickly for you, community facilities is all about building new facilities, significant upgrades of current facilities, and it could also include the purchase of a building or a facility that's suited to your needs. So when we look at this, we look at the facility having significant benefit to the community. We have 2 funding rounds for this each year in May and October. And we can receive applications outside of those funding rounds if the application is for less than $50,000. Community development is around enhancing the lives of those that live in our community. So we kind of talk about it as people, programs and purchases. The types of things that we do fund out of this pot of funding is mostly operating costs for community organisations, projects and equipment purchases. In this fund, we have monthly funding rounds, and it's normally a 7-week turnaround time for that. A couple of things we don't fund is repayment of debt and operating costs for schools or sports clubs. Community events is really about supporting events that add vibrancy to our community and that are available to large portions or sections of the community. And we assess those applications on how the event will add to economic, social benefit, help bring people together and all those types of things. So again, we have a monthly funding round for our events fund, and that has a 7-week turnaround time frame as well. And these are our contact details. So either do a quick print screen or quickly write those down. That's how you can contact either Jeanette or myself. Always happy to talk one-on-one about various funding options and how you can get your foot in the door with TECT and how you can put your best case forward. We work with everyone through the application process to make sure that what you're submitting and what lands with our trustees as the decision-making group is in the best shape possible. So we're quite relational in that regard and happy to talk to anyone at any time. Kia ora, thank you.
Thanks, Paula. So as Paula said, those are their details. However, I should have stated at the beginning that I am going to email all of this out, including the taping of the whole process, plus all the handouts and presentations that you can pick up. So don't worry too much about taking notes because you'll all get it tomorrow, and it'll also be available on our website probably next week sometime. So the next person we have off the block is from Acorn Foundation. Margot, you're here, I know, somewhere.
Yes, I am, Kathy.
Great. Thank you.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. It's lovely to see everybody. It's a lovely fine day at my place. I don't know where you're all hiding.
Lovely here.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and
Good.
talk about the Acorn Foundation. Is that working?
Not
Margot, sorry, Margot Tyrene. Can barely hear you, honey.
Okay. Can you
hear as clear as yours, Kathy?
Okay. So do you just want to speak up a bit, Margot, or can you put your volume up?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
Hang on. Now I have actually lost
your volume.
Can you hear me? All right.
I can, but what about you, Irene?
Yeah, just though.
Ah.
We can just hear you. Can everyone else hear it? Thumbs up. Oh yeah, okay. Let's go, Margot.
Okay, so you're seeing my my slides, not my face.
Yes, yes.
Excellent, excellent.
Yes.
So the Acorn Foundation is our region's community foundation. When I say our region, I'm referring to the Western Bay of Plenty region. So I know we have some people in the room tonight who are from the Eastern Bay, and I'll talk to that a little later because we do have a function in the Eastern Bay partially as well. But our role is to connect generous people who care with causes that matter in our region forever. So the money that Acorn has to give away comes from generous local people in our region, primarily through people leaving a gift in their will. And that money is pooled and invested forever. And we just use the investment income to make grants to local charities and community groups in accordance with our donors' wishes. So our distributions are led totally by our donors. There's 3 ways people can set up their funds. They can leave their money fully unrestricted, in which case we have a process with our volunteer distributions committee to allocate that money across our priority areas. Some people choose a field of interest, so that may be something like the environment, or it might be young people at risk, or it might be animal welfare, and other people advise us exactly how they want their money given away. And currently, around 2/3 of the money that we distribute each year is actually tagged by our donors for particular charities. So the largest one of those is the Waipuna Hospice. They receive over $100,000 every year from Acorn. They don't have to apply. They don't have to account for exactly how it's spent. It's theirs to spend on wherever their greatest need is in their organisation. And I really encourage all of you to consider how that might appeal to your organisation by talking to your supporters and members about the idea of leaving, of setting up a Acorn Foundation fund and nominating your charity to be a beneficiary from it. It's a really, really effective way of generating a long-term income stream. We started in 2003 and have distributed just over $10 million since then. We're growing extremely rapidly. Of that $10 million, just over $2 million was actually distributed in the last 12 months. As I mentioned, 2/3 is tagged by donors, so we have no discretion over where that goes. Our maximum grant is $10,000. That's what you can apply for. And this is what I mentioned for the Eastern Bay of Plenty. We are a local donations manager for the Tyndall Foundation in both the Western Bay and the Eastern Bay. And so for the Tyndall Foundation, we have to distribute their funds. They give us around $90,000 a year to distribute on their behalf. And that is specifically for their family or whānau and community sectors. So if you are in the Western Bay of Plenty and you want to check whether you may be eligible, go to the Tyndall Foundation website and check the very detailed rundown on their website of exactly how they set their priorities. We do have some basic information on our website, but there's a lot more detail on the Tyndall Foundation website. This year, our funding priorities are supporting organisations to provide access to housing and to reducing inequity. So that is around the accessibility of owning or renting a safe, healthy home, improving basic household financial skills, providing tenancy support services, and or wraparound housing support for tenants or owners of substandard homes. We've got a major new initiative this year to support youth aged 14 to 24. Another area is in health and wellness or safety, and that is specifically around drug and alcohol abuse, reducing domestic violence, and reducing child abuse. The one which probably will capture many organisations is building stronger communities. So if you don't fit specifically into any of those other areas, you'll have to convince us how you are, the work that you do is building stronger communities. And this is where the bulk of our distributions do go into the sector. We do distribute widely, but rather than, when you apply to us, rather than just sticking to what you put in other funding applications, if you don't fit those other categories, please explain how the work that you do builds stronger communities. Another area is Kaupapa Māori initiatives, supporting cultural development and intergenerational transformational transformation. The environment is one of our priority areas. And we also have a range of donor-directed funds, which we allocate based on our donors' requests. We have several categories in there, ranging in size from $1,000 to a total of $22,000 a year. So do have a look at our website. Those are spelled out very clearly, those other donor-directed categories. This is very timely because our annual funding round, we have just one funding round a year, it opens on Monday. So we're open for applications until the 26th of May, at which point we'll close them off, and then we'll be processing the applications and calling in to visit you if we feel like we need to learn a bit more about your organisation. And then payments to successful organisations will be made in September. You'll be notified late August. Please, if you're unsure whether you qualify to apply to us, come and talk to us. Our contact details are on our website. Have a really good read of our priorities, and we're very happy to talk through whether or not it's worthwhile you're applying and your best approach. So Joe Wilson is our main person who handles the funding inquiries. So Joe and myself will look after you and make sure that you get the right sort of information. So that's me. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I think that's the key message that all the funders always tell people. If you've got any questions, just give them a call. So let's move on now to Lotima from Bay Trust. Now I know he's here.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Kitty, thank you.
Kia ora.
I'll just share my screen.
Right.
Unlike those two others, I'm not as flash, but our website is enough for my slides. Kia ora, tātou. Kia ora, tātou. I'm Lotima Vaiolet. I hail from the East Coast, Wharekaika, Ngāti Porou. Also on my father's side, I hail from Tonga. I am the newest member of Bay Trust. I am the Community Investment and Iwi Relations Coordinator. And that really just encapsulates looking after the community support, granting, also playing a big role supporting the team at Bay Trust, and really being that bridge towards iwi and hapu for the trust, as we see them as long-term partners for the long run. Just a little bit of our purpose before I get on to what we are as an organisation. So our purpose is to accelerate bold, meaningful change and assisting BOP communities and the environment to flourish through toi tangata, the people, toi tu te taia. That's when we're looking at our environment, and toi te hua mā koha koha. That's just generosity to all. Right, moving on. Actually, I should do this first. So Bay Trust came into play around 1996. Bay Trust is one of the 12 community trusts over Aotearoa, and we look after the Bay of Plenty. For example, Trust Waikato looks after the Waikato area. We used to be the community trust banks, but as in 1996, we sold the organisation, the bank, and from there was leftover money, and it wasn't allocated to government, but towards the community. So there was the initiative to ring fence that money, reinvest that money, and distribute that towards the community. So we started off with something like 90 million and have grown that over time, and in doing so, increasing the amount we can grant towards the community. Looking towards more our priorities and our direction towards funding. So we go into kaitiakitanga. That's one of our priorities when we're looking at the environment. So any initiatives through organisations that benefit and impact our environment positively. Going towards community wellbeing and tū Māori mai. That's when we're looking at tackling little systematic change. We talk about wānanga to Māori mai in the sense of really supporting Māori aspirations in that area. We also look at the priority of sustainable employment and inclusive growth. So that's a lot of supporting youth initiatives, trying to get smooth processes, looking at organisations that run pathways from school to employment. Recently, though, we've found that sustainable employment and inclusive growth could actually meld together with community wellbeing, and we're looking at splitting Tū Māori Mai to its own priority in kind of the direction our strategy is going. We also, in our other priority, healthy, secure and affordable housing, pretty straightforward, funding into initiatives to help for substandard and affordable housing. And moving on to the next, looking at our funding tiers. So we have three upfront funding tiers. That's our community support and event funding applications, which is up to 20,000 K, and that is a monthly round, and those close the end of or the previous month. For example, if you were to apply for the June round, you'd want to get an application in by 31st of May, and those are that requires less due diligence when it comes to assessments due to the size of grant. We're moving on to the community impact funding round. We're looking at initiatives or projects that create an impact in the community and hopefully strongly aligning to one or more than one priority in terms of alignment. We also have our community amenities fund. So that's when we're looking at big environmental projects or capital projects. For example, last year through our amenities fund, we were able to support Kutaroa Marae or Matakana Island. So when looking at funding marae, we have an option there to go through the community amenities fund or through the community support fund up to 20K, whether it be fit-ins or support towards the overall marae development plan. I won't get into much of the strategic partnership fund. That's more on a request, whether we hear of a project and we really request to come in and present your initiative. So that's over 100K. The immediate fund is 100 to 500. So that's our funding tiers. Just a little bit on. So with the community funds, just a little bit more on that. That's already opened. That will close on the 27th of May. So the expression of interest is open right now. So if you had a big environmental project or a capital project that there's huge community benefit, we ask that organisations come to us, have a chat, and we would ask if to put into an expression of interest, and from there we'll go through the process with a decision in September. And since we're here, there we go. So our main, when it comes to eligibility for funding, we look at, we hopefully you're either a charitable trust, or incorporated society, or limited liability with charitable status. So if you're outside of that, it's kind of sits outside of what we usually fund, but there are ways around it, whether there's an umbrella organisation that is willing to take on your application. But so far the best thing there is to be within there. We mainly support operational cost and project costs when we're talking about capital costs that mainly sits in the community amenities fund. And and I think that's all. This is our team. This is our lovely chief executive and impact investment, Yvonne. And then when you're wanting to come contact for granting questions, whether it's you don't feel like you're quite aligning with the priorities or you don't know, feel free to get a hold of Sam or myself, Lotima, you can just find our details on our website in staff, down the bottom here. It's all my information here.
Thanks, Lotima. There is a question there from Rupia, I think. No?
No.
Okay, good.
Yep. Kia ora
Okey-doke.
tātou, thank you.
So thanks for that, Lotima, and don't forget you can ring him at any time. So the next person we have up is Donna from Lotteries. Donna.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, so kia ora koutou, ko Donna Morgan Tukinwa, he kai tohu tu hapuri ki te tari tai whenua. That mouthful just means I'm a community advisor for the Department of Internal Affairs, or DIA. Some of you may know us as. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Again, like everyone, we've got a PowerPoint and slideshow. Get up. Can everyone see that? Okay.
I can.
Cool. And you'll have to excuse me if I start coughing and spluttering. Everyone around me is tested for COVID. I thought it was going, but it's obviously not. I don't think I've got it, or not yet anyway. But anyway, Department of Internal Affairs, DIA, most of you will know us as Lotteries. We are not lotteries. That's just a small part of it, but we look after lotto and also crown funding for the benefit of our communities. We pretty much do exactly the same as our other funders, TECT, A Trust, and also Acorn, but we have a wider focus, obviously, at our national level. Our team is actually, we call it Team NRG, Napier, Rotorua and Gisborne. So most of you may already know that Tauranga is largely served by the Rotorua office. However, we have had a shortage of staff lately, so do not be surprised if you get a phone call from some in Napier or Gisborne as well. Oops, my next page isn't working.
Oops.
Just some general information. You do not necessarily have to be a legal entity to apply for funds. If you're a new group starting out, you can apply up to 10,000 under lottery or our COGS. So some people say it's not worth it for 10K, but 10K is worth a lot for other groups. Our grants generally last for 12 months, and depending on what they are, for community facilities or in our oranga marae space, your grants will go longer than that, but everyone is required to report at the end of that period. Because we have so many grants, I'm not going to talk about everyone specifically, but all our grants have different exclusions, and you must meet the eligibility of each different grant or trust that we do have. I'm not sure how many different funds we do have currently. They've been changed a little bit, but there's anywhere from 30 to 40. So I'm not going to talk about all of them tonight. I'm just going to focus on the two key ones that most of the communities do apply for, and that's COGS and lottery community. Excuse me. So COGS, or Community Organisation Grant Scheme, this is government funded, it's Crown funding, so that is actually under the jurisdiction of the New Zealand Financial Reporting Act and everything else that government has to do. It is for not-for-profits delivering community-based social services. In saying that, when we're talking about community-based social services, you could be a small cultural group or a small school group or just a group of interests. So it could be in gardening. You would still be eligible to apply for this. So don't let the term social services turn you away. You also have to achieve outcomes. In COGS, we have different committees for each region, and for Tauranga Moana, these are the outcomes that you actually need to address, the ones in blue. We do under COGS, and Kathy, I'm aware you mentioned people in Eastern Bay of Plenty. So we do have Mātātua that covers the Whakatane or Pōtiki area. They have a different set of outcomes, similar but different. We also have Rotorua, Taupo, and in Tauranga Moana. So these are just for Tauranga Moana. I'll show you our site later where you can find the other committees affiliated. It is a small fund. We only fund approximately 3 to 7K per year, but it is, you can apply for multi-year funding. This is actually a really good fund for new groups who are starting out. This is where a lot of groups get their opportunity before they apply for bigger grants or bigger funds like Lottery Community or Lottery Community Facilities. It's actually a really good place to start is under the COGS scheme. It's currently open, closes 20th of May, and you will have your decision and payment 21st of July, and payment will be made within the week after that. Excuse me. And just so you're aware, funding or allocation from government on this is by region. There is some magic calculation. Currently, Tauranga Moana has a total fund in COGS of about $480,000 per year to allocate. But yeah, it does differ by region. Excuse me.
Donna,
Yep.
you can't change your slides. Is it jammed?
Is it jammed?
Well, it's only on the cover page. I thought you knew that.
No, I didn't. I can see all of it.
Apologies. So,
Oh,
right. So,
I've come off. Sorry.
Try it again.
So first screen.
Yeah.
Oh.
No more. Can you put it into the edit view
Yeah.
rather than the PowerPoint view, and we could probably see it that way.
Sorry. Can you see that?
Yes. So go to the next slide.
Oh,
Just go. Yeah. I think that's going to be the way you'll have. Oh, yeah. That's the way we're going to be able to have to see it.
Okay. So quickly going back, there's your general information that I'll read on about.
But everybody will get this anyway.
Yeah. So that's general information about COGS, and bearing in mind that in blue, those are the priority or outcomes under Tauranga Moana only. Excuse me. Lottery Community, we actually cover plenty, and it's all about plenty as well as Gisborne. This is one of the biggest funds. This is currently sitting at about 7.5 million for distribution within Bay of Plenty of Gisborne this year. Tells you how much we are playing lotto actually. It's a huge fund at the moment. It previously was only about 3 or 4 million. So this is a good fun if you've actually already got a good history of receiving grants and good financial management. So it is largely for operating costs and projects which help improve the quality of people's lives. Again, in blue, the priorities, you must actually meet some of those priorities, and these are for Bay of Plenty, Gisborne area. You can, under Lottery Community, apply for minor capital items up to 30,000. You won't need formal quotes generally. You could actually provide us just a list, say it's from Noel Leeming, and just put a whole lot of the items in there so we can actually have a general idea of what the costs are. And there are 2 funding rounds per year. Oh, excuse me. The next one coming up is shortly, 22nd of June. It's only open for a month, but the issue with Lottery Community, because it is so huge, you will not find out your decisions until 19th of October. And then we have another round occurring again in November. And again, decisions will not, or payments will not occur till March of next year. Okay, seeing that. General exclusions for both of these funds. We do not fund food for food banks. Don't be confused if you were to run a program and you were purchasing food or lunch for the program or your clients. We can actually fund that within Lottery Community. We just cannot do food bank high. Don't do funding for individuals. We do not allow research. That's actually a separate fund. And we also don't run pay for fundraising activities, which is actually caught people out. So if you have a person that you hire specifically to fundraise, we cannot pay for their wages. And then for these other issues, people often cry, particularly around the animal welfare. We do look after that under a completely different fund, which is the Minister's Discretionary Fund. Excuse me, sorry. I think that will do there. And
We're running out of time.
Yeah, general requirements, you'll need a RealMe login, full budget, regardless of if you are only applying for a portion of the cost from us and your financial records for less than 18 months. Top tips, I needed to do this. The top one's the most important one. You answer questions succinctly, especially the first question, and the first question is, what do you want the funding for? This is really important. It seems silly, but after 20 paragraphs, often we do not know what you are requiring your money for. So just state it quite clearly in one paragraph. We're not joking. When the lottery community committee sits there and they've got hundreds, it's actually quite frustrating for them to figure out what do you actually want your funding for. And then, so further information, we have our community matters site, .govt.nz, that has all of our funds listed there and our requirements. You can email us at communitymatters@dia.govt.nz or phone us. Due to staffing issues right across DIA at the moment, a lot of people got COVID, and just leave a voicemail or email and it will be answered within a day. Well, hopefully it better be, but it could be answered by anyone across the country at the moment. I think that's me. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Donna. And as you've said already, you have multiple different funds, and so if you've got any questions, you're best to ask which fund you fit into. So,
and it is the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're moving right along quite quickly to Richard Butler from TCC. Hey, Richard.
Hi, Koto. Richard Butler here, funding specialist from Tauranga City Council. Now, I never use Zoom, so I'm going to try and share my screen. So fingers crossed it's going to work. Oh, that doesn't tell me anything. Hold on. What has that done? Sorry, bear with me for a moment. Oh, here we go. So, yeah, just very quickly. So again, I've jumped onto the TCC website to show you the funding. So you can see there's various different types of funding that Tauranga City Council provides, and there's actually a whole lot of other ways that Tauranga City Council supports community organisations. But today I just really want to focus on the Community Development Match Fund and the Community Grants Fund. So clicking on the Community Development Match Fund, so it's an annual budget of $150,000. Sorry, people won't be able to see that, of $150,000 a year. And there's two different levels of funding that we provide. There's grants of up to $1,000. This can be for an individual or an informal group. And we try and turn those around really quickly, so you can apply any time for those. There's also the medium grants of up to $10,000, and we only have 2 rounds of that a year. To be eligible for the medium grants, you've got to be either a registered charity, a not-for-profit school or early childhood centre, or a kaupapa Māori organisation. So those are the eligibility criteria. And there are other, it's all in the guidelines. You know, there's a lot of things that we won't fund, but you really, I don't want to go into the detail for that. Now, we call these the match fund, and the idea is that when you're applying, you've got to match the support of the funding you're applying to Tauranga City Council from other sources. So that match may be in volunteer time, it may be in other sponsorship or other funding. And yeah, so it's pretty simple to, most organisations have no trouble making those matches. Yeah, great to see too that when organisations don't have, say for example, haven't got charitable status yet, that they're talking to other organisations. Those other organisations are acting as umbrellas for applications. So it's great to see that. So just going back to the other one. So the other main fund we have, the other main fund we have is the Community Grants Fund. So this is a budget of $1.8 million a year. It's not new funding. It was actually used to be allocated by way of annual plan submissions, but now it's being pulled out of that, and there's 2 rounds a year of the council financial year. So this is for grants of up to $50,000. So similar to the match fund or the medium grants match fund. To be eligible, you have to be a not-for-profit school, early childhood centre, kaupapa Māori organisation or a registered charity. And I just want to tautoko something that that Donna said. You know, these grant applications, they're about telling your story as an organisation, and you've really on that application, it should, you know, as with the other funders, only too happy to look at a draft application or talk you through it. But when you're putting in an application, it's really got to be someone picks that up and it tells a story about your organisation, and I guess particularly not just with the words, but also with the budget. It's really got to tell you a story, and you know, it's got to be a compelling story. And I really do feel that it'd be great to see, in a way, stronger applications coming through, because just been looking at some today, and you know, it's I'm not the person who's making the decisions on them, but when it comes to the decisions panel, you know, they're looking at a lot of different applications, and so it's got to be a compelling story. And I really do think that some groups are selling themselves short. And I think it's probably a bit of a trend in the whole community sector for people to sell themselves short. But there's one thing to take away from this. It's putting the time and the energy and the thought into those funding applications.
Yeah,
So that's me.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Kathy.
Right. Thanks for that. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions at the end of all this. Glenn, your turn. Glenn O from Western Bay District Council.
Thanks very much, Kathy. We've got two funds that are open at the moment. Just like Richard's, we've got a community matching fund that's open at the moment until the 31st of May. The difference between our two funds is that Richard's is in Tauranga City and ours is in the Western Bay. So if you're a resident of the Western Bay, you can apply for a slice of that. There's $140,000 in there, 100 for the general purposes and 40,000 for environmental projects. Typically, people apply for between 2,000 and 20,000. That's a common amount, and that fund is open for over a month now, so that's great. The second fund that we have available is the Facilities and the Community Fund. That's only open every 2 years. It also has $74,000 in it, and it's for public recreation and leisure needs, and for public use on non-public land. Now, hey, if you want more details about that, then go and have a look on our website. I did have some stuff to throw up on the screen, but I'm aware that we're a little bit over time. So Kathy, doing you a favour there, cutting it short. If you're in Te Puke and Mokoro, Katikati or Waihi Beach, we will be having workshops where staff will be out there. You're welcome to come into the libraries and ask questions. Again, those times and scheduling are on the website and you're welcome to look at that. But we'd love to see some applications coming through from those Western Bay residents. Thank you.
That was short and sweet. Thanks, Glenn. Okay, so we're going to move right on to the next section as we're about 10 minutes late, but that's fine. So now I would like to introduce Tracy Stockman to you. So Tracy has worked in the grants field for many, many years. Isn't that right, Tracy? And so she's very experienced and very organised, and she's going to give us a little bit of advice on the mechanics of doing your application. Tracy.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Just share my screen and make sure everyone can see the slide. Is that coming up okay?
It is on my screen.
Thumbs up, Richard, thank you. Excellent. So just a little bit about myself to start with. So as Kathy mentioned, I've worked in the not-for-profit sector, both in groups and with groups for over 15 years now. I actually contract to Social Link, so I do some of their financials for them and work with some groups under the Social Link banner as well. And I've worked with a lot of groups right throughout the country through the Tyndall Foundation, Auckland City Council, and just with groups directly themselves as well. So I know a reasonable amount about funding, so I'm pretty confident here, but I'm not a presenter or a speaker, so do forgive me if that's not up to scratch, but hopefully the rest of it will make up for it. So what I've learned, I guess, in the years that I've been doing grant funding, is that one of the keys to get to a really good application is the preparation and planning that you put into it. And it can be a great time saver too, doing that forward planning and preparation. The time it takes to do the individual grant applications can vary quite a bit depending on the amount you're applying for and the fund that you're applying to. So if you can really streamline the process, then you can take that extra time to submit a really good quality application. Just another bit, and some of the funders have alluded to this as well, if there's ever any opportunity that you have to meet with the funders face to face to talk with them, definitely take up those opportunities. The funders are generally very happy to talk with you about your application, what you're doing in the community, and that sort of thing. And it's definitely worthwhile to build that relationship. Right. Let's see if we can move on to the next slide. So to kick things off, I thought I'd just start by just running through the sort of the different types of funders that there are, the main types of funders that there are, just so that people are sort of clear on the different areas there. So there are gaming trusts. So the gaming trusts are the pokie machine type scenario, I suppose, that and they have to distribute a percentage of their profits into the area, and that's generally in the area where the money is raised. So that's the gaming trust. So that's the likes of Charity Limited, NZ Community Trust, those sort of funders. So they're when we talk about gaming trusts, that's who they are. We've got the community foundations, and that's where people leave a gift to their community, and so that's the likes of the Acorn Foundation, which Margot talked a little bit about earlier. Then we have local government, and Richard and Glenn have sort of touched on what they do there. So councils have their own pool of funding that you can apply for, and quite often they will administer some small funds on behalf of other organisations as well. Then we have central government, so that's generally in the form of contracts to provide services. So that's the likes of district contracts and agreements with district health boards, Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Justice, those sorts of organisations. So normally you'll have an agreement to deliver a particular service, and you enter into a contract with them to deliver that, and then they will pay you that contract. Foundations and trusts, originally attached to regional trust banks and energy trusts generally, so that's the likes of TECT and Bay Trust. And then there's also voluntary trusts, which are from family and individual trusts. So they sort of fall into that category as well. And then we've got business and corporate. And so some businesses have set up foundations to support charities and not-for-profit organisations. So that's the likes of the Vodafone Foundation and also ANZ Star Foundation. As well. So the next is the process. Sorry, I should have just mentioned at the beginning, if you've got any questions along the way, just pop them into the chat and Kathy will collate those and we'll go through them at the end of this session if we've got time before Megan from Exult does her presentation. And if we haven't got time in between then we'll get through a few questions. So I guess the process is fairly straightforward. It's all about preparing, getting everything ready, as much of your standard documents and everything that you're going to use for more than one application, having that all ready beforehand. And so that includes standard documents, which we'll go through a bit later on, budgets, financial reports, and program and service information. So information about what you actually do, what programs you deliver, and what services you deliver. The next step in the process is scheduling. So once you've got everything there, then you actually want to look at okay, when are you going to apply to funders? And it's generally a good idea, if you can, to schedule a year ahead in line with your budget. So what I normally recommend for your budget is that you would plug all of your expenses into your budget, look at what your expenses are and what they tally up to, then look at what your confirmed income is, and then you'll see what the shortfall is that you have to raise, and then you can start building your funding calendar around that. The next step is to execute, so that's your marketing and promotion and getting your organisation, the name of your organisation and your story out there. And then of course you've got program delivery. You're actually delivering the service, collecting feedback and evaluating it, and then at the end you're reporting back to the funders on what you've actually achieved. You reconcile the spending back if that's a requirement of your grant, compiling any feedback that you've got from delivery of the program, and then submitting a final report to the funder. So we've talked a little bit about budgets, and I've got some slides further on that have got some examples relating to that. Sorry, just let me. So you might, just in terms of managing your funding calendar that we were just talking about, you might use a project management system to manage that, or if you've got a database or a CRM, you can use that to schedule in when your funding rounds open, when they close. You can schedule in when you should start maybe completing that application, so that you're not completing it sort of right at the very end and submitting a late application, or one that's sort of at 11:59 on the last day of the before the closing date, and then any reporting needs. So there are some free online tools that you can use as well to help sort of manage your grants and your calendar in that regard. There's one called Grant Seeker, which I'll pop the link to that in the chat a bit later on, and that's a really good one that's free to use and an online one. So you can load your grants in there, you can put all the dates, the due dates and that sort of thing. You can assign tasks to people. So if you've got another person that looks after your budget and you want to assign that task to them by a certain date, then you can do that, and it will forward email reminders of when things are due, and you can keep a really good tally of where you're at with your grant applications there.
Tracy, we're losing you a bit.
Are you?
Just when you turn your head, it becomes very soft.
I might try and turn up the volume a wee bit.
Yeah.
Crank up the volume. Right. Just give me a shout out if that happens again.
Yeah.
Statistics is another good thing to sort of prepare in advance. So that's just, I guess, knowing the information about your organisation. So again, if you've got a database, then this might be fairly easy to do. You'll be collecting information about the sort of the people that you're helping, the people that are using your services, how often, those sorts of things. So that's, if you don't have a database, you can collect that sort of information perhaps in an Excel spreadsheet. And that's really good information to have beforehand, so that when it comes time to sitting down and actually doing the nuts and bolts of your application, you've got everything that you need at your fingertips to work through.
Oops.
Right, so when we talk about standard documents that most funders will want, this will sort of cover the bulk of things. So a performance report or financial statements. So if you're a charity, it's called a performance report. If you're an incorporated society or a not a legal entity, then it will be financial statements. And the only difference really is that the performance report also has a narrative about your organisation and what you've actually achieved and what you've done over the period that you're looking at. So there's a requirement for charities to report in that way. So the next thing is certificates, maybe affiliation certificate if you're part of a national organisation and you're maybe a branch and you have a national office or a head office. If you're an incorporated society, a certificate of incorporation, it's good to have that sort of on hand so that you can easily access it as well. Confirmation of your bank account details, so a pre-printed bank deposit slip or something certified from your bank confirming the bank account number, and that whatever the name is on that bank account, that bank deposit slip should match the name of the application that you're applying under. So it should, the organisation's name and who it's being paid to need to match. Support, so letters of support are always good. Some funders will specifically ask for them, and others you may, if you've got a particularly good letter of support, you may just want to include that. So that can be from past or current users of your service, or from other organisations that know or can vouch for the fact that you can deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Employment, if you're applying for wages, a copy of a current employment agreement, and making sure that that agreement covers the period of that you're asking for funding for. So you don't want to submit a fixed term employment contract, for example, that only covers the next 3 months, but you're asking for 6 months worth of funding for that role. So make sure that that's all current, and also make sure that obviously the salary or the hourly rate matches what you're actually applying for, and that all tallies up, and also a position description for that role. So just in terms of employment agreements and position descriptions, some funders won't actually ask for them. The likes of Bay Trust and TECT, and also Lotteries, you're submitting a budget to them which has your wages in it, so you won't be asked to show employment agreements in those scenarios. Excuse me, but the gaming trusts, generally, if you were asking for 3 or 6 months worth of wages specifically, then you need to submit a copy of an employment agreement and position description with that application. Another thing that I find is a really good time saver is having a one page with all of the common details that you use on it, so that you're not having to search from bit of paper to bit of paper or from document to document to find these details. So that's information like your GST number if you're registered, your IRD number, your bank account, your board members or trustees, your charity's registration number, or your incorporated society's number, and contact details and names of key personnel and referees. And that can be, as I said, a really good way to save time, so that you're not sort of hopping from one document to the other looking for that information when it comes to applying. Another thing that funders often ask for is a copy of your rules. If you're a registered charity, the funder may go to the charity's website and actually have a look for the latest copy for your organisation, but some organisations you will be asked to upload or submit a copy with your application. So my advice there really is just to make sure that your rules are all up to date, and that any changes to your rules or trustee to constitution have been signed off appropriately at the board meeting, and then registered with charity services if you're a charity, or incorporated societies if you're into that category. So yeah, making sure that they are registered, those changes is really important. Another document that I think is really good to have up front is sort of what I call an about us summary. So it's just a a 1 or 2 page document that has the nuts and bolts of who you are and what you do. So information about the history of your organisation, your vision, your mission, what services and programs you deliver, and what your achievements are and what your outcomes are. So what are you trying to achieve? What have you achieved? Anything new that's sort of in the pipeline in the next 12 months. It should be a document that if somebody picked it up, they'd have a really good overview of what you're about and what your organisation does. The good thing about that document too is that when you're doing funding applications, you might copy and paste some of the wording into a funding application where it's appropriate. And it just helps with the consistency of wording, particularly if you've got maybe different people doing funding applications. So it's a really good way of making sure that your message is consistent.
Tracy, you've got about 10 minutes left.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
That zoomed along. Okay, I'll speed up. And the only other thing is agreements. So if you've got any rental or lease agreements in place or loan agreements, always good to have those in one place as well so that you can easily access them. What I'll say about this, I've covered it further on, but I might have to sort of skip through. What I would say about this is either, depending on how you work, have hard copies of all of these documents maybe in a folder together, or have them online in one shared folder so that people can easily access them, but have them all together so that you're not sort of rummaging around and maybe finding older copies that shouldn't be used. And so a few application do's and don'ts. A really good idea to obviously check that what you're applying for meets the funding criteria, and also the funder priorities, which can change from year to year. So some funders might set priorities for the next year or the next 2 or 3 years. Others will leave them the same for a longer period of time. But don't take it for granted that just because you applied last year and their priorities were X, Y, Z, that will still apply this time. Take the time to actually look at your website and check to make sure that you know that what you're applying for is a current priority. All of the funders have mentioned this, I think. Talk to the funder if you're unsure that your project meets the criteria. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone or flick them an email. I think Donna touched on this briefly. Make sure you provide the funder with exactly what they're asking for. So even though we've got some standard documents there, some funders won't want all of that. They'll be very specific about what they want, and they may give you, a limited number of characters to put into a field. So you will have to adapt your application to what the funder has asked for. So yeah, take time to read through and be very clear about what you're providing them with and what they're asking for. Tell the funder what you want in a concise way. We've talked about that. Let the funder know who you are working with and why. So that's about what other groups are you collaborating with, who's referring clients to you, who are you referring out to, who are you working with to deliver programs and services. And check your spelling and any calculations that you've got, or better still, get someone else to check those for you. Some don'ts. Don't submit an application before you've completed the reporting requirements from any previous funding. So just making sure that you've tidied up the last lot of money that you've got from a funder, that you've fully reconciled that and reported back to the funder before you submit the next application. Don't submit an application after the due date, even if it's half an hour after the cut-off time or the next day. Some funders may let it slip through, but chances are it will be pushed out to the next round or it will be declined. Not a good idea to rush the application and submit it at the last minute if you can possibly avoid it. So take that time to get your standard documents together so that you have a bit of time to sort of tailor it at the end for the particular funder. And just another one, we might not have time to cover all of this, but don't apply to any gaming trusts or any of the funders that we've talked about tonight for funds to top up a government contract that is underfunded. Most funders will not cover that. The expectation is that if it's a government contract and it's a service or program that you're delivering for that contract, that what you're being paid should meet everything needed to fund that program. Right, budget do's and don'ts. We'll go through this very quickly. Make sure that you have both your income and expenses in your budget. Make sure that your budget amounts match to what the story that you're actually telling in the application and the amount that you're applying for as well. Let funders know what income is confirmed, and I'll talk about that in the budget example that's coming up next. Don't show a deficit in your budget when you submit it, because funders don't want to see that you realise that you haven't got enough money and that you're just going to go with that. You either need to pull back on your expenses a bit, the same as you would in your household budget, or increase your income. So those are the main things as far as budgets go. We've just got an example budget here that we've got in an Excel template to send through to you after the workshop. So that's just a month-by-month budget that has totals at the end. We've got confirmed income at the top and unconfirmed income at the bottom for a total income value, and then we're listing out our operating expenses underneath. And then we've got some program costs in there as well. Then we've got a project. This is an example of a project budget, which you might have a youth program or something, or some sort of program or service that you deliver. So this can be a good way of actually working out, okay, what is it actually costing us to deliver this program or this service? Plugging the figures in here, and then this is in the budget template as well. This feeds through to your master budget. How are we going for time, Kathy?
You can have another 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll go as fast as I can. So I've just done an example here of a TECT application in the funding section there. And then so there's the budget on the left-hand side, and then to the right is the questions that are asked in the TECT application. So just how we take the information out of the budget and pop it into the TECT application. So you'll see there, we know what our confirmed income is, that's 78,200. So straight away we can put that in 7.1b to know how much money we've already raised for that. We're asking TECT for $15,000 in this scenario. The total cost of our project or operating budget under D is 122,878, and so we see that that matches with our total operating expenses from our budget, and then the difference is the money that we need to raise to make everything balance at the end of the day. So in 7.2, we're just confirming what that 78,200 is made up of. And then in 7.3, we're saying that we're just telling TECT how we're actually planning to raise the rest of the funds. I'll just go very briefly through this. Quotes and for projects and events. Generally, if you're submitting an annual budget for operating costs, you won't need quotes. Again, it's more for the gaming trusts, or if you're applying to the other funders for a particular item that you may need to get a quote. So it's just some guidelines there. You'll need either 2 or 3 quotes. They shouldn't be more than 3 months old. The quote should be addressed to the organisation. Normally a website printout or a screenshot and not normally accepted. There will be some scenarios when you can't provide more than 1 quote, so let the funder know why you can't do that, and okay with it if you've got a reasonable justification for that. Some gaming trusts will cover operating costs for a specific period, say 3 months, and what they want in that scenario is copies of the last 3 months worth of bills, lease agreements. I've got a couple of pages of top tips here. This will be in the, Kathy's going to circulate this as a handout as well. I think a lot of the things we've actually gone through already. So just a couple of things here I'd like to highlight is that oftentimes applications are declined because there's not enough funding to go around. It's not necessarily there's anything wrong with your application, it's just that there's not enough money. So if you're not sure, ask the funder, and if it is due to not enough funding, then you may be able to submit another application in the next funding round. Just resubmit the application. Funders, I think it was Paula that alluded to this, and it's a good thing. Many funders list on their website organisations that they've previously granted money to. So it's a really good idea to have a look at that to get an idea of the level of funds that have been granted and what sorts of organisations are being funded. It's really good. Use Excel for budgets rather than Word if you can, to just reduce the risk of calculation errors. Try and keep your text as positive as you can, and debate and funder what you will achieve with the funding and how the community will benefit. Funds need to be used for the purpose stated on your application and what the funder actually approved. So just make sure situations do change, and sometimes you might need to what you applied for is not relevant anymore, or you can't go to a particular supplier, for example. But you need to go back to the funder in that situation and just check with them and get something in writing to confirm you can still proceed with spending those funds. You can't spend any of the money prior to the date the funding is approved. That's called retrospective funding, and there aren't any funders that will cover that. Any unused funds need to be returned to the funder at the end. So, you know, if there's a few $100s that you haven't spent, then generally you need to return those to the funder. Reporting, so this is also known as completing an accountability. So what you're really doing here is it's a chance to go back to the funder to thank them for the funding, to let them know how much money you've spent, how you've spent it, what you've achieved with it, who's benefited from the work that you've done or what they've funded, any challenges that you've had. Funders quite often like to know, you know, what challenges you've faced. If there's something that you thought was going to work a particular way and it didn't, then the funders know. And it's a good chance to provide some feedback and evaluations and case studies as well, to let funders know what you've actually done. And again, the reporting requirements will be quite different from funder to funder, and could also depend on the amount of funding that you've been granted. And funders will be very, very specific to what they want in that regard. This is a really important one, succession planning. Thinking about how the organisation would keep going with grants and with getting funding if you weren't around, making sure that you've got copies of all your standard documents, fully completed grant applications that have already been submitted, all of your reporting and accountability documents, a summary of you know, who you've applied to, who's been accepted, who's declined, and any training material resources relating to funding as well, and make sure that other people have online, preferably online access to those documents, but hard copies may work as well. Some funder feedback we've got there, but I think the funders actually covered covered these when they spoke themselves, so we can skip past that. We've got a few templates that Kathy will circulate at the end. So an annual operating budget with project budgets in there as well. Some sector terms and jargon, so a couple of pages of that. A grant summary template, which is in Excel, just for tracking the ins and outs of your funding applications if you don't have another way of doing that, and also a case study template. There's a few useful websites there that you can go to get some information on not only their funding, but they've got those particular sites have some really good reference to other funders as well that might be beneficial. And that's me.
Hey, well done. Thank you,
Thank
Tracy.
you very much.
So we've got time at the end for a whole heap of questions and answers. So if you want to make a note of them or shoot them through to me on chat, we will address all of them at the end. So thanks, Tracy. That's a lot of information. And I have put those documents that you spoke about in the chat. So they're there already, but you may find it easier to wait till I will email them tomorrow and you'll get them all in one email. It's your choice though. So thanks, Tracy. Big job. Lots of information there. You're a brainy person.
Thank you.
So now we were going to have some breakout rooms and let everybody have a bit of a break, or should we continue because we are running a little bit late? Shall we just continue? And we'll move right on to Megan's slot, I think, because it dovetails neatly into what Tracy's been saying. So let's do that. Megan, you're here? Yes, there she is. Goodbye, Tracy. Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Oh, you can stay for Megan's if you want to.
I'm going to. Absolutely.
You can do what you like.
Love listening to Megan.
Yes.
Wealth of knowledge.
Which you can, of course, only do if I'm not on mute.
That helps.
Kia ora, everyone. My name is Megan Thorn and I am from Exult. So Exult, we exist, what we're really passionate about is working towards all community and not-for-profit organisations working at their full potential. And the way that we do that is through providing training and support for community and not-for-profit organisations at the business end of running your organisation. So around awesome things like raising funds and like raising your profile, which is what we're going to dip into this evening. Around things like growing great volunteer teams, around specific areas of funding. So we run workshops around donations and sponsorship and all sorts of different income streams that are available for community and not-for-profit organisations. And we do strategic planning and governance. We do all sorts of things, all focused around the business end of running your organisation and all working towards all community and not-for-profit organisations working at your full potential. So very privileged to be here this evening to share a little bit around raising your profile. And I've really loved listening to funders share what it is they do and the funds that are available and listen to Tracy talking about with all the awesome information around your funding applications. And as I was sitting here, I was thinking, so, you know, what I'm talking about raising your profile. So how does that fit in with thinking about funding? And for me, raising your profile is the starting point. And what does that raising your profile means? It means shouting from the rooftops the difference that you make in your community and what you do in order to work towards making that difference. And I think the more you can focus on, and I totally hear that you're juggling all sorts of different balls and doing all sorts of different things, but where you can put some focus into raising your profile in the community, then you're constantly potentially touching on funders with different ways of sharing the good that you're doing in the community and different ways you're making a difference. So that's where I feel it fits in. Sort of raising your profile is happening all the time. And then when you get to the point where you want to connect with a funder and talk about a fantastic project that you're doing, or something that you're doing to make a difference, then you've got great ways of telling compelling stories, and they will have seen the things that you're doing in the community by default, by just going about their day to day. So I think it's really, really important thinking about raising your profile. And as we get to the end of my chat this evening too, I've got, it's a couple of different ways about thinking about how you tell compelling stories, because that was one of the things that was shared in terms of Richard from Tauranga City Council, thinking about where there's potentially a gap with what's happening at the moment. So let us get into it though. So raising your profile, I'm just going to see if I can share my screen. Hopefully you can all see the title screen. Yeah, title slide, brilliant. Okay, lovely. So let us start with a definition of marketing, because that's what raising your profile is all about. So marketing is the total sum of activities required to make a sale. Actually, if you Google marketing, you will get many, many, many different definitions. And then you can drill down into that and you can get a definition of content marketing, online marketing, guerrilla marketing. There's a million different kinds of marketing. What I love to do is keep it really simple. So marketing is the total sum of activities required to make a sale. And there's a couple of pieces there too, because often we think, if we potentially put an ad somewhere or we list in a community directory, then that is marketing. And it is a part of marketing, but actually the whole of marketing is much wider. Because the total sum includes every touch that someone has with your organisation. So right from the first time they encounter you, wherever that might be, it might be picking up the phone to make a phone call, it might be coming into your place of premise if that's the case. It might be seeing your organisation drive past on the back of a bus. There are all sorts of different things that could be, but actually the marketing is the total sum of the activities required to make a sale. And that make a sale piece is quite corporate-y speak. But for community organisations, the making a sale piece is much more transformational than transactional, because you're working to get people to do something differently, which is different from the transactional, which is buy some stuff. So your make a sale can look like whatever it is the action that you want people to take. So it could be signing up to your Facebook, or liking you or following you on social media. It could be signing up to get your newsletter. It could be volunteering for your organisation. It could be buying a ticket to a fundraising event that you're having. It could be actually utilising your services. So making a sale for community and not-for-profit organisations, there's lots of different pieces to it. But if we try and jam all of those things into the definition, we'll be at half a page in no time. So making a sale is much more about the transformational change that you have versus transactional. So always keep in mind that it's the total sum. It's right from first touch point through to whatever it is that's the action that you want people to take. And you're taking people on a journey. And I wanted to share a really nice way of summing it up for me, which I love. I always think, why reinvent the wheel if someone's done something fantastically? Maybe it should just stay as it is, or we should share it as it is. So this is a quote from Lee Salters, who was Frank Sinatra's publicist. And he said, if the circus comes to town and you design a sign saying circus coming to town Saturday, that's advertising. If you put the sign on the back of an elephant and walk into town, then that's promotion. If the elephant walks through the mayor's flower bed, that's publicity. And if you can get the mayor to laugh about it, that's public relations. And if the townspeople go to the circus, you show them the entertaining booths, explain how much fun they'll have, spending money at the booths, answer their questions, and ultimately they spend a lot at the circus, then that's sales. And if you plan the whole thing, then that's marketing. Yeah. So marketing is all about thinking about the total sum of activity. So it's thinking about, for a specific target market, what is the action that you want them to take? And then what are the levers that you will pull to help them walk through a journey? And how then, as community organisations, can we do that as efficiently and effectively as possible? Because sometimes we don't have big budgets, and often we're juggling all sorts of balls. So it's how can we choose the levers really carefully to walk our target through that journey to take the action that we want them to take as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can. And there's 3 steps that you want to guide people through on the marketing journey. And those 3 steps stay the same no matter what it is that you're asking people to do. So the first step is discover. So you want people to discover that you exist. And this can look different for all sorts of different things that you're wanting people to do, your target to do, but you want people to discover that you exist. The next thing you want them to do, or the next step in the journey, is you want them to relate. So you want them to get to know, like, and trust you. Yeah. And that's what you're thinking about when you're completing your funding applications. What are the things that we can do to help the funder, our funders, get to know, like, and trust us within the bounds of what they're asking for in their funding application? And then the last step, the thing you want them to do, is experience. So that's whatever it is, the action that you want people to take. So the same 3 steps of the journey, no matter what you want people to do. But I want to share a couple of different examples. So let's say that your organisation's decided to have do a sausage sizzle to raise some funds. So you get everyone to talk about the sausage sizzle, you make up some posters and you post some information on Facebook. You get to raise awareness that the sausage sizzle was happening. You ask all your volunteers to spread the word, and you make some posts on social media and you ask people to spread the word via those posts as well. And then it gets to the morning of the sausage sizzle and you set up, let's say you're setting up at your local hardware store in the car park there, because they've kindly enabled you to have the use of their sausage sizzling equipment for your fundraiser. So you get all set up, maybe you put some balloons up to let people know that you're here. You maybe put a bit of music on so people hear the music and they, their interest is piqued and they come and check out what the music's all about. You might pop up some photos of your programs in action, because it's an awesome way to bring things to life, to actually show people what you're doing and the difference that you make as you're talking about it. And then you sizzle away with the sausages. So, and then someone comes over to your sausage sizzle and they sort of saw the balloons, heard the music. I'm looking at your photos there. What is it that you guys actually do? It's an awesome opportunity to share the difference that you make in your community, your vision, and what you do, and bring what you do to life a little bit through the passion that you use when you're sharing. And so they have a bit of a chat and then they say, oh, right, okay, I love what you do. I might sort of look out for you guys and I'd like to buy a sausage sizzle. So you're asking for, in terms of investment, a $2 sausage at the sausage sizzle. But you've walked them through that journey. So you've got them to discover you. So with the promotion that you did beforehand, with the balloons and the music and everything that you had at the stall on the day, you've got people to discover that you're there. Through chatting and talking about the images that you've shared or your pictures of your impact in action, and through the discussion with you, you've enabled that person to get to know, like, and trust you. That's the relate phase. And then the experience piece is the buying of the sausage at the sausage sizzle, the $2 investment. So that's one example. And then on the other hand is another example. So let's say that you're sitting in your local doctor's surgery. You know how you sit in the doctor's surgery and you look up on the wall and there's all the brochures up on the wall and you notice that there's a leaflet for your local branch of Riding for the Disabled. And you kind of know about Riding for the Disabled, you know it involves horses, but you don't really know a lot else about it. So your interest is a little bit piqued and you pick up the leaflet, and it's also got some amazing photos. And it hasn't got a massive amount of information on the leaflet, But it does point you to their website, and you think while you're sitting there, I'd actually really like to find out more about what they do. So when you get home, you go to a computer and you go to their website, and you take a look around, and they talk with you about why they exist and what they do, the vision and mission. You can watch videos of vision in action. You can look at pictures. You can read the past newsletters. You can find out lots of information. And you do. And there's also a button there that you can push to sign up for their newsletter, their regular newsletter, which you absolutely do. And then newsletter comes to your inbox once a month, and you read through it. And again, there's lots of examples of the impact that they have. And the difference that they make in the community. And you actually start to learn that there's a whole lot of different programs involved. They work with people at all sorts of different levels. And actually you find out through the newsletter that they're having an open day. So you think, I'm off to the open day. So you go along to the open day, and actually you get to meet a horse, and you get to pet a horse, and you get to talk to someone who is part of delivering programs as part of Riding for the Disabled. You get to talk to one of the children who takes part in the programs as well. You leave that open day feeling very, very inspired. And then you see a press release in your local paper a couple of weeks later, and then a couple of weeks after that, there's a donations envelope, or an ask envelope arrives in your mailbox, and they're asking for a donation. They've given you a couple of different options, and one of those options is $200. And after finding out all of you found, actually you think, I would really like to donate $200, and that's what you do. So that's another example of walking through the journey. So the discover phase happened in the waiting room at the doctor's surgery. The relate phase, getting to know, like, and trust, there were lots of different elements to it. So there was going to the website, signing up for the newsletter, open day, seeing the press release. And then the experience was when the envelope, appeal envelope arrived in the post asking for a donation, which was $200. So the difference between those two stories is the level of commitment that you're asking people to take. So the steps are always the same. You want people to discover, you want people to relate, and then you want people to experience. But the larger the commitment you're asking for from people, the longer you need to spend in the relate phase, enabling people to get to know, like, and trust you. What we sometimes do, though, is we meet people for the first time. We say, hi, this is us, this is what we do. Can you make a donation of $200? Yeah, and then wonder why it doesn't quite fit in terms of what we're asking for. We don't always get what we're asking for. So the steps are always the same, but depending on the level of commitment that you're asking people to take, the longer that you need to spend in the relate phase. So there are all sorts of different levers that you can pull to help you move people through each stage of those journeys. So there's levers, marketing levers that you can pull at the discover phase. So, you know, things like the leaflet, the post on Facebook, you can have a sandwich board. I'm going to talk about some different levers that you can pull at the discover phase. Then there's different levers that you can pull at the relate phase that share more information that enable people to get to know, like, and trust you. And then you need to give people a way to move to the last phase, the experience phase. There's a couple of key things to keep in mind. The first is to get really clear around who is your target? Who is your target market for the journey that you're wanting them to step through? Because who your target market is important in terms of the best levers to pull at the discover and relate phase. The next thing to think about is what's your goal? So what is the experience phase? What is it that you want people to do? What's the action that you want them to take? Sign up for your newsletter, follow you on social media, become a volunteer, or explore that a bit more. What's the action that you want people to take? And then the next thing to think about is, what is your plan? So how do you decide what levers that you pull at the discover and relate phase, and how those levers work together to guide people through that journey? So whenever you're thinking about what specifically you do, you're always thinking about for what purpose, and how does this fit with my greater plan in terms of who my target is, and what is the action that I want people to take, and what's the plan? And it doesn't have to be a complicated plan. It's just thinking about how are you going to step people through the different stages of the journey. So we don't have a lot of time this evening to talk about each of the different phases, but one of the things that I did want to do is to talk to the fact that it doesn't always have to be a massive spend. So you don't always have to have a huge marketing budget in order to raise the profile of your organisation. So I was going to say, who's heard of Movember? But actually, it's highly likely that quite a few of you will have. The purpose of sharing this story is this is a really awesome story about the Movember Foundation, who at a point in time, so this was in 2017, they realised that, sorry, it's the 2018 campaign. And what they noticed was between 2016 and 2017, the amount of funds raised by their regular Movember campaign had dropped quite massively. So 2016, they did great. 2017, things dropped off. 2018, they were like, right, we have to do something different. And so there was a couple of things happening that led to that. So if you know about Movember, quite often we think of Movember Foundation as being all about prostate cancer, but actually they actually focus on a couple of other elements of men's health as well. So they also focus on testicular cancer and mental health and suicide awareness. But what they noticed was the number of organisations who were also vying for people's attention was growing quite massively. And things had changed a bit since they started the Movember Foundation. So it is now, or at that point, was quite common, for want of a better word, for people, or men specifically, to have facial hair, so to have grown moustaches and beards. It's quite a trend. In fact, I reckon probably Movember kind of probably kicked that trend off. So they realised that they needed to think differently in terms of what they did for that specific campaign in 2018. So what they decided to do was they knew that so they wanted to focus the campaign. The goal for the campaign was to get men to talk about mental health. And specifically for this year, they wanted to get young men to talk about mental health because sometimes it's something that young men find hard to talk about. So they wanted to really focus this campaign on getting young men to talk about mental health. And what they realised in doing the research was there are 178 schools in New Zealand that had a clean shaven policy. Boys' schools. So what they did was they wrote one letter and they sent it via snail mail to 178, those 178 schools with a clean shaven policy. And they asked if the principal for the month of Movember would relax the clean shaven policy. So the tagline was, please let the bros grow mows. And so they sent the letter asking if the clean shaven policy could be relaxed. They talked about why, and they talked about the importance of talking about mental health amongst young men. And they also provided lots of resources for the schools to help them talk about the campaign. And it was a massive success. They got lots of media attention around it. They also sent this letter to a couple of media outlets as well. And it was a massive success because it was doing something different in the context of the goal that they were working towards, so getting young men to talk about men's health. So just in terms of investment, this was at a time where postage was a slight bit cheaper. So it cost them $178 to send the letters. And in terms of return on that investment, their donations increased 58% on the year before. So they took 1.7 million in donations. And they generated around about 550,000 of media exposure just through the campaign and getting news outlets to talk about it. So that was a return on investment in terms of their marketing spend of around about $9,500. So it doesn't always have to cost a lot. When you can get really creative and think really differently around how you do things, there's potential to cut through all of the other organisations who are trying to do things as well. So in terms of this evening, what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the discover phase to start with, and then talk about a really important element or a really important tool that I think is underutilised at the relate phase. So one of the things at the discover phase is to be creative. So there's lots of different levers that you can pull. So this here is Ye Humble Sandwich Board. But it's a sandwich board that's delivered in a really creative way. So instead of just being your square sandwich board, they've shaped it into the into the shape of a person doing yoga. And you'll notice that at this point too, there's very little information. So Flow Yoga haven't gone into the details of everything that they do, but what they've done is they've given a way for people to find out more. So that's really key at the discover phase. It's not about sharing all your information then, it's about literally how do we capture people's attention and get them to discover us. And if you can be creative around what you do, then it increases your chances of capturing attention. So this was a campaign by the World Wildlife Foundation. And it is tapped into, so their target was youth. And their target was youth and getting youth to think about the potential, the species that were on the edge of extinction, if I guess is a way to frame it. So given that their target is youth, they chose the medium of Snapchat, and they were really creative in terms of the Snapchat campaign that they did. They also used the hashtag last selfie, which connected very much with, at the time, what people were doing in terms of social media. So there's 3 examples from the campaign there. So it also, the medium, Snapchat, where photos and videos are only available for a very short amount of time, tied in really nicely with the message that they were trying to send in terms of extinction. So better take a screenshot. This could be my last selfie. Don't let this be my last selfie, or don't let this be my last selfie. And there was lots of different ways that they brought that to life. So it really connected really well with your target. And then they also gave information so that people could donate, and they encouraged people to share and spread the word around the campaign as well. So they had some quite specific goals and monthly goals in terms of this campaign. And then the first month that they ran it, they hit their targets in 3 days. So, it really connected with those that they were sharing the information with. So here's a billboard done in a different way. So it's the Naval Museum of Alberta. Instead of just having the post that the billboard sits upon, it's crafted as, I can't even think of what that's called now. I'm going to say the wrong thing. It's got a scope in it, and it's not a stethoscope. So it's the thing that, thank you very much. Thanks, Judy. A periscope, and it had scope in it. So you've got the periscope there that looks like it's that is part of the post. Again, it's getting people to discover you. So the information on there is brief. It's the Naval Museum of Alberta. It'll catch people's eye because it's just something slightly different. And then you can go to their website to find out more information. And this is the donations box. So this is from Children's Hope, an organisation in Philippines. And sometimes the humble donation box is poo-pooed, but they found a really nice way to connect people with the difference that their donation can make. So as you put your money in the slot, you can see the picture on the outside of the donations box turns into a blanket, which will be provided for a child. So it's a really nice way of enabling that organisation to show people how their donations, no matter how small, can make an impact in terms of what they're trying to do. And this is from an organisation called, Crossroads Community Services. So it's an organisation based in New York, and it's an organisation that works with people who are homeless, providing all sorts of different services for those people. And what I really loved about this campaign is its purpose was to connect people walking on the street with those living on the street. So it's literally chalk art. And it helps to bring to life the difference the organisation makes. But actually, and the purpose of this campaign was to jolt people out of complacency in their, their day-to-day run-of-the-mill. So what some New Yorkers eat is hard to swallow. So someone's created, you can see what it is, I don't need to talk through it. But it was a very low investment campaign. They found someone who was great at chalk art and then were really creative in terms of how they brought that to life. So I wanted to share those examples as ways that you can get really creative in terms of how you enable people to discover you. And why that's important is they have to discover that you exist before they take the next step to get to know, like, and trust you. So one of the tools that's really helpful at the relate phase, so when people are getting to know, like, and trust you, is your vision statement. And how many of you know your vision statement off the top of your head? Some of you? Awesome. Okay, so some of you do. That's great. Awesome. So I've borrowed this quote here from Alvin Toffler. Like I said, why reinvent the wheel? So here's the power of a vision statement. So you've got to think about the big things while you're doing the small things so that all the small things go in the right direction. And that's what your vision does. Your vision keeps you focused on the big thing while you're doing all the small things, so all the small things go in the right direction. And I think that vision statements are sometimes a bit underrated. And I think if you can craft a really strong vision statement that very clearly sets out why your organisation exists and paints a picture of the difference that you want to make in your community, then that goes a real long way to enabling people to get to know, like, and trust you, to relate. But it is also really important for your funders in terms of knowing what your big picture is, why you exist, and what is the future that you're working towards creating. When you can frame that up in a really powerful vision statement, then it goes a long way to enabling people to know, like, and trust you. And I wanted to share a couple of examples. So the one I always share is Exult. I can think of it off the top of my head really quick. And I used to introduce myself at the start of workshops by saying, hi, my name is Megan Thorn and I'm from Exult. And we provide training and support for community organisations at the business end of what you do. And it's kind of like, yeah, so what? And now I'm much better at leading with our vision and then sharing our mission. So we're really passionate about working towards all community and not-for-profit organisations working at their full potential. And the way we do that is through providing training and support for community and not-for-profit organisations at the business end of running your organisation. So quite often I talk with people about their elevator pitch. So you've got not very long to connect people with your organisation when you start talking to them. So if you can get really great at sharing your vision up front, your framing of why you exist, and then your mission, what you do, in a succinct sentence like I just have, then that's your elevator pitch. And once you frame up that elevator pitch, your vision, why you exist, and your mission, what you do, and do check them out. This is a little bit of homework from the session. Does your vision articulate why you exist? And does your mission articulate what you do? Check that out when you have the opportunity. And then when you put them together, is that your elevator pitch? And once you frame those up, then everyone can share that elevator pitch. They can share it in a consistent way. And everyone is really clear around why you exist and what you do, so that when they start conversations, in fact, it's really much, much easier to start conversations because they've got their elevator pitch framed up. So what I wanted to do is share two more examples. So one is from an organisation that we did some work with. It's a budgeting organisation, and I share this example a lot. But I share it because I think it's such a great example. So we share a question with organisations, which I'm going to share with you in just a second, which frames up, or is a great way of starting to think about why you exist and the difference you make in the community. And we shared this question with a budgeting organisation a couple of weeks before we worked with them. And they got in touch with us just before the workshop, and they were really excited. We loved that question. It got us really thinking about why we exist, and we haven't really thought about that for a while. And we've got to a point with our vision statement, and we wanted to share it with you to see how, if we're on the right track. And so at that point, their draft vision statement was to create a community where people were empowered to make sound financial decisions and could live a life of abundance and prosperity. It's quite long, that vision statement. Lots of big jargony words, abundance, prosperity, etc., etc. And we said, great start, and let's see how we go during the workshop. And at the end of the workshop, their vision is, and I don't even need to read it, the vision they now have is to create a community where no one has to wake up and worry about money. Yeah. So powerful, because it helps to paint a picture of the difference that they're working towards making. So where you can frame your vision up so it paints that picture of the difference that you are working to make, then it paints that picture for whomever reads that vision. And for funders, it's the start to telling your story in a compelling way, because you get them with that framing of your vision. So November, I just thought I'd share their vision and their mission. So their vision is enabling men to live healthier, happier, longer lives. So everything that they do works towards that vision, enabling men to live health. It's a bit of alliteration in there that I'm struggling with at 8:28. So then here's the question. So, and don't worry about writing it down because Kathy will send the notes to you. So if your organisation was doing everything 100% right, what would your community look like as a result? Yeah. So it's a really great framing of a question. Take it back to your team if you want to do some work around your vision and make sure it articulates why you exist. There's also a really awesome talk by a guy called Simon Sinek, which talks about the importance of starting with why. And the premise of that talk is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you exist. Yet as organisations, we often lead with this is what we do. So when you can get really great at leading with your why and then following up with your what, and I'll pop the link to Simon Sinek's talk in the notes as well. So if your organisation was doing everything 100% right, what would your community look like as a result? And as I was listening to people sharing earlier too, to the funders as well, if you could just change the wording of this slightly to, if this program was operating 100% right, what would our community look like as a result? You can use it to help frame up the purpose of your funding application. What's the difference that you want to make? So you can just slightly change the wording of this. If your program was operating at 100% or everything was doing everything right, what would your community look like as a result? And that can help you to frame up the purpose. And then a mission, what makes a great mission? It describes what you do to make your vision a reality. Literally, what do you do? And I've often heard feedback from funders who have said, I've read through funding application and I still do not understand what this organisation does. So get really clear around what it is you do specifically that helps you work towards your vision. And here's my members example. So we engage, empower and mobilise men, giving them the information they need to understand the health risks they face and act upon them. And then when we put those two together, it's quite a mouthful. The mission is quite long, but when we put it together, so hi, I'm Megan from Movember. We engage, empower and mobilise men, giving them the information they need to understand the health risks they face and act upon them in order to enable men to live healthier, happier, longer lives. So that's your vision and your mission put together, or your mission and your vision in that example. So fantastic tool for enabling people to get to know, like, and trust you. Brilliant. And make sure you frame up what it is you do in your funding application in a real succinct way so that those who are reading it can read it and understand it immediately and quickly. Make it as easy as possible for those who are reading the many, many funding applications that they will be reading to totally get why you exist and what you do. Brilliant. And that is me, Kathy, 8:31, my apologies.
Oh gosh, that's great. Thank you, Megan. That was
snippet. So I just wanted to let you know too, so we run workshops often in the Bay of Plenty, very fantastically subsidised by Bay Trust. So I'll pop a list of workshops that are coming up in the back end of this presentation so that you can check them out, but around sustainable funding, growing great volunteer teams, raising your profile, secretive sponsorship, and also we're running a governance workshop on Saturday the 14th. So I'll pop some info in the back end of this so you can check it out if you like. Brilliant.
excellent. Well done, you. You said you talk fast.
I did.
You did, but that's okay. It was great. Thank you for that. Now we're going to move into our Q&A session, people. And I do have a question already. Megan, are you going to stay?
I'm stopping sharing my screen. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Great. So thanks very much. So we do have a question here already, and it's possibly for Tracy. Where is it?
I've got it here.
Oh, have you?
Yep.
Oh, well done.
That?
Yep.
Okay. So there's a couple of ways that you can tackle that. One is if it's you can just do a budget for that particular project and then submit that project on its own to a funder to get funded. So that's an easy way to do it, sort of if it falls outside of your usual funding period. The other thing is, don't be afraid to tweak your budget through the year. But you set your budget, you know what you know, but things change, so it's a working document. So don't be afraid to if something comes along and you think, yes, we want to do that, let's bring that into the budget. Don't be afraid to revise your budget.
Perfect. Anything's possible. The world doesn't live in static. Anybody else got any questions about anything? If you've got questions for the funders, we can possibly help with that.
Actually, just something else that might be helpful, Kathy, a question I get asked quite often, and that's about new staff members coming on board.
New staff
members, yeah, how to factor new staff into your budget.
Oh, yeah.
And what I normally recommend is that you have a wages and salaries line, and then you add a separate line for new salaries and staff or new staff members, so that it's really clear that what your existing staff is and what your, what that totals, what your budget is for that. And then the new staff or the extra staff members are staff that you'll employ once you've got the funding, or once you're confident that you've got a reasonable amount of funding towards that, so that it's really clear the difference between the two. That's a really good way to factor in, because a lot of groups sort of think, well, I haven't got the money and I've got to wait till I get the money to get the new staff. But then if you don't put that into your budget, you won't get to that point.
Okay. Sounds sensible. Questions? Now's a really good opportunity. So just to reiterate, I'm going to send out tomorrow. I will send out all the attachments that I have. The recording of the Zoom, I probably won't send it out till next week, and it will also be on our website. So I'll flick you the link to that as well. Here's another question. Tracy, how did you put that on your screen? So this is from Gemma and Kate at Waimarino. We're a non-for-profit education trust operating on site of a well-known business. How do we show funders that our applications stand apart from the business name? Interesting.
On site of a well-known business. Gemma or Kate, are you able to pop your microphone on and just sort of tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so we're Waimarino Education Trust, which are a non-for-profit education trust doing after-school care, holiday programs and school programs. But we are on site at Waimarino Adventure Park, which is quite a well-known place in the Bay. And so we've had issues in the past where funders kind of see the name Waimarino and just assume that we're a part of the business, not the education trust. So we're just wondering how we can make it in our applications known that we are separate financially and as a business completely separate, so that we actually do have a chance of getting funding.
Yeah, I think the best place to do that is really early on in the application, like as soon as you can, or in a cover letter or a cover email, make that the first thing that you cover off, so that it's really, really clear that do you have separate bank accounts, I'm guessing, if your finances are all separate? So yeah, make it really, really clear that it's outside of the business entity. Does the business itself, how does that business support the trust?
It cut it out.
Sorry, cut out. What did you ask?
So how does the business support your organisation at all, in terms of, I'm guessing, giving you space and that sort of thing?
We lease the building, so they've obviously, we share office space, or like the offices are split in half, but the trust pays like a yearly fee to the business for equipment hire and office hire and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, if whatever they sort of contribute and to your organisation, just sort of highlight that as well, and then I would launch into what you do as an organisation, how you make your money, you know, what the benefit is to the community for what you do. Richard, have you got anything to add?
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Ah.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just really acknowledging that it is a hard issue. It's a difficult situation that you're in when, you know, people identify with the business and the business has such a high profile. No, I guess I just acknowledge that and really support what Tracy's saying, just to be really upfront and as clear as you can in making that distinction.
Thank you.
So here we go. There's a couple more in there now. Do you want to read, Tanya, from Play Centre Aotearoa? Where are you? Would you like to read your question out? She's not there, or she's on mute. So Tanya asks about the Tyndall Foundation. Tyndall Foundation don't usually fund ECEs. But
I can read it out. Sorry, I hit enter too early. On my
Okay.
question,
Right.
I only typed half of it. I work for Play Centre as a national organisation supporting the local play centres with their grant applications, and we were told that Tyndall Foundation nationally wouldn't support ECEs, but they align very strongly with the whānau and looking after communities with Play Centre's philosophy. So would as a local, an LDM, would Acorn Foundation consider play centres? Would it be a case-by-case basis?
Tracy may know that.
I think you'd probably be best to talk to the Acorn Foundation about that directly, because they, what they fund will be quite different to what's funded through or not funded through the Tyndall Foundation. And I guess from when you're looking at organisations where there's a, you know, you're applying nationally maybe, but for a local branch, the main thing there is to make sure that you really highlight what the local benefit is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'd definitely give Margot a call or flick her an email and have a chat to her about that.
Okay, thank you.
Tony from STEAMED.
Yeah, so we take part in a lot of public events like STEAM Fest and Tauranga Careers Expo and all that sort of thing. So lots of public contact, and you know, when they say how many people are going to benefit from your money, well, I mean, from your, you know, services, how do we reflect that sort of big open public? We just can't. Yeah, you know, our day-to-day services might be 1/10 of the actual public that we're actually reaching, and so I never know what to put.
It is a hard one, that one. It's and really it's just a best guess. I mean, I guess the Tauranga Careers Expo, for example, they do tend to know what volume of foot traffic they have through those events from, so you can only go based on you know, historically for the previous year, how many attendees they usually get through that event, and then you might say that, you know, 60% of them sort of pull past your stand or something like that, and come up with a rough calculation that way. It's it is a really hard one. That it's just really a best educated guess based on what you know.
Yeah, they never let you put in any comments beside it or anything, so it's impossible to actually reflect what you are doing.
It is, but I guess at the same time, if they're not asking for any context for it, then just work it out and put the number in there, knowing that if you're asked about it, you can actually say, well, this is how we calculated it. It's not just a number that we didn't just think of a number and double it type of deal.
Right, no more questions. Oh, great. So we'll just close the meeting. What was that? Sorry.
Nikki, did you just put your hand up.
Oh, sorry, Nikki. Go for it. Quickly, quick last one.
Sorry, I was just typing.
Oh.
So we operate online and through television nationwide. So how does that, when it comes to nationwide, obviously analytics on online website and stuff like that, we haven't got those numbers. Does being nationwide affect local funding grants?
Yeah.
Richard, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, we had a very similar situation just recently, and I think it's very hard for national organisations, you know, to make the case of what the benefit is locally, and particularly, you know, if you think from a Tauranga City Council perspective, when it's say competing with a group that's only local or even in a neighbourhood, it's quite a disadvantage, and it's a hard case to make. It's a very hard argument to make. Yeah, you know, some national organisations will say, well, we want, you know, we think it should be a percentage of funding coming from Tauranga because you represent X percent of the country's population. But it's if you can't make those analytics and actually say what the direct benefit to Tauranga people are, it's a hard case to make, and it's a hard case. You know, we just had that very situation last week, and it was hard for that group, you know, when it's competing with local groups to make a strong or compelling story in that instance, unfortunately.
Does it make a difference because we are actually run locally? Our team is only
strengthens, because if I think of the other example, that was an Auckland-based organisation. So if you are a locally based organisation, that strengthens the case for local funders.
Great, thank you.
I guess, Nikki, too, it could come down to just looking at how you can collect information to show, you know, what your local reach is. Is there any way you could, through your online presence, sort of gauge what the reach is locally, so that you can demonstrate that to funders?
Yeah, we're looking at how we can do that, but in the meantime, it's very much, you know, we have download options. You don't know how many people are clicking on things, and with it being online, it's actually available to anyone throughout the world. So it's like, you know.
Yeah.
But you can measure your clicks through Google Analytics and some of those tools. So there
some of them, but they're very limited.
And that gives you geographical areas too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Nikki, one of the things that we do at our council is if somebody is from outside of our district, we encourage them that when they provide their service, that they target it towards our district. So, for example, you might have a service that goes right across the whole region, but you say, this year we've decided to do this particular thing in Te Puke. And it's only a very slight version from what you normally do, but it's targeted so that the funder knows that the money they give you is not going into your general administration pool, that it's actually going towards that particular area.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, so let's call it a day there. Just thanks once again to our funders, Tauranga City and Western Bay District Council. And Glenn, I'll ask you to do a closing karakia for us, please.
Sure, thank you, Hayley. Let me just thank you, Kathy, and all the other people that have been involved in tonight. It's been fantastic. I'm sure a lot of good information's gone in, and hopefully people can retain it. Normally this is the time of night where we say to people, I hope you have a good drive home and stay safe. But you're already home, so you just have to walk down to your bedroom. We'll do a karakia anyway, so me inoi tātou anai nei. E te atua, te akina i a mātou, mai ngā mea e takoto ana i mua, mea muri i a mātou. Ki rongo o mātou mātenga, ki mātou, ki maui, ki raro o mātou waiwai. Me era atu taha katoa, ki whakarairai ai i a mātou. Tūturu ko tō te akina pūmau, ki rongorawa i ngā mea katoa. Te atua kaharawa, aimini. Thank you, everybody, and safe travels to your bedroom.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks for that, Glenn.
Maria Koto.
Thank you, everyone. Good
Yeah,
night.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks
See
for
you
organising.
on, we'll see you on email.
Thank you.
Thanks.